And blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning. Our great friend, Senator Russ Fulcher, joining us once again. It was great to have you on yesterday. It's people are going to be talking. This might be the Russ Fulcher show.
No, this is the Kevin Miller show. But if I would have been on time yesterday and I would have not slipped and slid my way in yesterday morning, then you wouldn't have to give me 2 days in a row. But I'm really thankful, so thank you.
Well, we were focused a lot on the weapons issue and the Second Amendment, and really, when we have a race so important, it is our duty to make sure that we talk about congressional issues, big issues that I'm sure on the trail that you get asked about. And, let us begin. And by the way, if you want to talk to Senator Fulcher, 580-5436, 580-KIDO, we will focus primarily on congressional issues, the budget, defense, all those things that are pertinent to what's going on, the possibility of the Republicans losing the House. So let's begin. The biggest issue facing us here in Idaho within the first CD, based on what you've heard, and I know you're about ready to go on the trail one more time as well.
Yeah, there's actually two things that are neck and neck that keep coming up every single time we have a town hall or a meeting, and one is something related to immigration and the ramifications of that for different reasons, but immigration's right there, and right on the heels of it is healthcare.
Indeed. So
that's not going to surprise anyone. It was a great relief to people that the mandate has been pulled from the healthcare rules, but people are still feeling it in their pocketbook, and we all need to have health care in some fashion, and the costs are astronomical. So it's right up there, and of course, immigration. Those are the two, Kevin.
Senator Fulcher, when we take a look at, and let's just stick to this because we've got a ton of issues to cover, the Idaho perspective. On one hand, we've got a lot of ranchers and farmers. Your family has been here in the state for many, many generations, and we understand the need for migrant labor. On the other hand, you have the situation involving border security and safety. So when you're asked about this on the trail, what is your policy if elected? What will you bring to Congress? You
profiled it very well, and therein lies the conflict. Because it is a rightful role of the federal government to deal with the immigration issue. That has to do with national security, has to do with the nation's border. And you profiled it very, very well. There are those who really depend on that migrant labor, and that's in our dairy industry and our ag industry. And basically their message is, look, there's got to be a channel where we can get access to that labor. There are also those right across the street who say, yeah, but we've got folks that are coming in here that we're fearful they don't want to assimilate. We're fearful they don't want to be Americans. We're fearful that they're going to try to just generate their own culture, and there could be a threat here. So that's it. And generally speaking, you need to have one policy for immigration. However, how you administer it is the key. And I think the one thing that everybody seems to be unified around is better border security, whether that's a physical wall, whether that's a virtual wall, a combination of both, but a better portion of border security. I certainly support that. That's got to be foundational in this whole thing. But once people do come in, how you handle it needs to be different based on those needs and on those regions. And so in the case of the migrant workers, absolutely need to take into consideration what that worker visa looks like, how those workers are abiding by the law, affirming that they're abiding by the law and holding them accountable on that front. And at the same time, if somebody is coming in as a refugee from a different nation, there has to be some kind of screening. There has to be some kind of vetting. And that's not simple, but we owe that to our people to do that. Yes, we need to be compassionate and respect people's needs that are fearful running from other nations. By the same token, we have to protect our own. So there has to be some sort of difference in how you implement those policies.
We go to the phones, and we go to Cindy in Caldwell for Senator Fulcher on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Cindy.
Yes, Kevin, and thank you, Senator Fulcher. I'm really learning a lot more about you. As you know, I've made hundreds and hundreds of calls for Raul Labrador, and I know he supports you. So I'm learning about you. But I want to say, sir, yesterday you said something just to start off. You're talking about safety now, but I'm glad when you said you were tied up in traffic. But I'm glad you actually put a word out for, because you said to Kevin, and since I've had my car hit and totaled many times, that you had an earbud and you were listening to what he was saying, but I believe you were also attentive to the road. So I just want to shout out and say thank you for that. And I'll just leave that deal. But sir, what I would like to know, I want to know how you are going to come alongside, our president. My dad worked for Ultramar, and he worked for Victory Carriers, Aristotle Onassis, and carried oil back to the United States. And I know 92% of our, transportation is depending on petroleum. I believe America can be energy, independent of the world. And I would like to have you speak to that, sir, and also getting businesses back. Really quick, I'm appalled. I would get plasma, and once again, the company called yesterday. We do know in the United States, we have, in this area, no IV bags. My nurse, I get plasma once a month, to work. So
now, wait a minute. Are you asking about energy or plasma, Cindy?
I'm asking about business, because this pertains that we don't even have a factory in the United States that makes a plastic IV bag. So 2 questions. How are you going to get, because this affects me and the quality of care that I get, my nurse tomorrow will not have an IV bag because we have no factories. We're depending on Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic, which still doesn't have a grid up. So 2 questions. How are you going to get more business back here? And how can we become energy independent?
All right, Cindy.
Covered a lot of ground there, Cindy, but thank you.
Cindy does cover a lot of ground, yes.
But I do thank you for that. Also, you started it off with support for President Trump. I do support President Trump. He's been a change agent, I think a welcome one. Our styles are clearly different, but by the same token, he's kind of what has been needed to turn that place on its ear. And you know what? It's hard to argue with his results. And so, in general, I think his agenda is going to have a friend in me there. And so that's first and foremost. But I will also put the disclaimer out there that my job is to support Idaho first. I'm not a disciple of any man. I'm going to stand for what I believe is right in the best interest of the people of Idaho. In terms of business, he has laid a pretty good blueprint for that. If you want to grow business, make it easier to do business. And that means allow them to operate on more of their operating cash, reduce that burden, and you'll get it back many times over because they're going to grow, and that's what's happening. And so I believe and I follow that model, and I've experienced that personally. And so that's the short answer on business. Just make it easier for them to operate, and that's the answer to that. On the energy front, this is an area where we have a real opportunity to shine, Cindy. Idaho has got incredible wealth in the energy arena, and if you're an energy exporter, that does massive positive things for your economy and your prosperity. So, if the government's role there is to make sure that it can be harnessed, make sure that we have the trade policies in place where we can export it. At the same time, you have to make sure that however that harvesting is not infringing on people personally, but it's just a wise management and wise use of what God gave us in that arena, and so making access to it and realizing it's a critical part of the economy.
Well, Cindy, thank you very much. Senator Russ Fulcher with us as we continue on. Let's talk about something that Senator Crapo talks about quite a bit. And by the way, we'll take your calls at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. The debt, the deficit. As someone who has been involved in one of the most important industries, companies here in the state of Idaho, Micron, for many, many years, doing international business. In addition to that, now you've got your own company, working with folks coming into the state. Senator Fulcher, what do when we take a look at balancing the books? You've had to do this in your own business, for other businesses. We've got this huge debt, this huge deficit. The tax cuts are great, but if elected, your thoughts on how we pay this off.
Excellent point. And I would say in relation to this issue, there's a lot of similarities with how business has to operate. You have to attack it on both ends. You have to cut your spending. You got to grow your revenue. And in the case of the federal government, it has become bloated over the course of time. Probably the number one reason that I'm motivated to do this is I want to see the control shift, that balance of power shift from the federal government to the states. More importantly, from to the people, not to government. That's where I want to see that control. But it has bloated so heavily. We have departments, we have agencies, we have bureaucrats, we have organizations that simply, I don't think, need to be there or bloated way out of proportion. I'll give you a couple examples. The Federal Department of Education is, I don't even know really why it should be there. That's the responsibility of the states. The portions of the EPA have gone so way out of whack, and so those are things, in my opinion, that just either need to go away or greatly be shrunk, and that's tens of billions of dollars right there. So on the cutting side, those are things that just need to be cut. On revenue growth, once again, I think Trump's model has stimulated that revenue growth, and with the access to some of the energy industry that he is helping open up, and with the reduced burden on the existing organizations, that's infusing some of that growth that come back to the states, come back from foreign areas where they've left and gone to, encourage new businesses to grow. Those are the two ways that you do it. There's a third one, and I don't want to ramble too long, so give me the high sign if I'm going too long here.
We'll do that.
Okay.
We'll come back to the third one when we're talking energy, and we're talking the deficit next with Senator Fulcher. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And we're back here with Senator Fulcher, Kevin Miller in the morning. We continue on. So we're talking debt, and we're talking the third prong, if you will.
Yeah.
And again, people might think, well, Kevin, we've got a lot going on. That may not be the most exciting, but it's so relative because, let's face it, we all get bills. We all have our own profits and P&Ls at home, paying the mortgage, paying this. And we would just like the government to be as responsible as we are.
That's right. And so we've talked about, the question on the debt and how do we balance that federal checkbook, and how do we make up for some of the spending that has put us in this hole. So there is a third prong from what we were talking about, and this is not going to surprise anybody that listens to me talk, but it has to do with our lands, and those lands are a tremendous natural resource, and right now the federal government is so overextended, they simply are over their head. They don't have the ability to manage it wisely, be wise stewards of it, and so they don't. And so the effect of that is in the fire season, and we literally see our beautiful state coming up in smoke. And so there just needs to be some wise stewardship there, and there needs to be improved access, and it needs to be managed more locally.
Let me, and pardon the interruption, sir, let me ask you a few questions. And again, you just don't say you're here in Idaho. Your family has been here for how many generations? 100
and some years. I'm fourth generation.
So you're fourth generation. So let's say something. For most of us, it's just words, but farmers and ranchers. I have a friend of mine. We won't say his name. He farms in Weiser, a nice young man. He said, Kevin, what the BLM is doing because of squirrels and owls are driving the folks out of business. We see that with the timber industry. We see that people are being landlocked out of hunting and fishing here in Idaho. So as a congressman, if elected, speaking specifically to the ranchers and farmers that are very concerned about the expanded powers and the influence of the BLM, how do you address that?
That control needs to be here. And I'm not saying that we need to just wrest physical ownership of it, but the control needs to be here. And I do believe we have a window of an opportunity right now with an administration in the White House who gets it. Not only do they get that from a practical standpoint, they get it from a fiscal standpoint, because the federal government, remember, this is your resources should be a profit center. Well, in the West, those resources are a cost center for the federal government, and that's how those are business terms. But
Right.
that's what our president is. He's a businessman, and so he sees those resources as a cost center, profit center, and he wants to balance that bottom line. And so we need to negotiate and slowly transition that control back to the people of this state. And I see those ranchers and farmers all the time. You're exactly right. That's what they tell me too. And if we're going to proliferate our way of life here, if we're going to expand and grow our economy, our culture, our society, our lifestyle, and be in control of our destiny, we have to have control of the resources under our feet. And so that will be a big mission for me to work on that.
More with Senator Fulcher next. First, traffic and weather together. And we appreciate that, Larry. Senator Fulcher with us, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. So we're dealing with getting local authority back, and it won't be long, again, as you've talked about, sir, where we're going to have to deal with the fire season again.
That's right. And every year, state resources, federal resources are employed to try to go in and put out fires that have already been started. And inevitably, there's exceptions to this, but inevitably those fires are started because the fuel load is just way out of control, and because we haven't let anyone go in and just clean up the brush, and turn that into biofuel, or wisely harvest and then replant and those types of things. And so, and let things get bug infested. And that's what happens when you don't take care of a resource, and we're not taking care of it. So, not only does that resource get lost, but then when it goes up in smoke, it damages our economy. It puts damages our environment. It puts a tremendous amount of carbon in the atmosphere every time there's a wildfire.
Indeed. Senator Fulcher with us as we continue on. When you go to Washington, you've had a chance to speak there over the years. What's the impression that they have of Idaho? And if elected, how will you enhance that? As we've talked about, you've got a ton of folks coming in. We're going to have a third congressional district one day. But the perception of the gem state, and if elected, what can you do to enhance that?
This will probably be the largest freshman class of congressmen, at least in the last 50 years. Now, of course, we don't know that for sure, but just the way things are lining up, that could very well be the case. Well, what that means is those who are plugging in for the first time are going to have a lot more influence than a typical freshman congressman. And in a state like Idaho, I think that bodes very well because, number one, if I am blessed to be successful with this, and I think we're going to be, I feel very comfortable in that environment. I've worked internationally for years and legislatively at the state level for years. And I've spent a lot of time in D.C. I know how that works. And so the other thing the other dynamic is that the mix, that polarized mix of R versus D, is going to be a lot tighter. And so I think that bodes well for a state like Idaho, especially if the representation that we have has got some experience and got some skill set in working in that environment. And so I'm excited about it. And I've met a lot of these people, and they know who I am, and they know that I'm very possibly going to be working with them, and we're already setting the stage. And I'm certainly not hanging the curtains in the office yet, but we're going to have an impact. We're going to have an impact soon.
Speaking of an impact, we've got a couple minutes left. For folks that have just moved here, and you know this, you're tied into the businesses and the people moving in. Specifically, look, a lot of folks have a Boise bias. I think I have a Meridian bias, a Treasure Valley bias. For people that don't know you, they've maybe discovered us on the FM at 107.5 FM. What makes you uniquely qualified more so than the other folks running right now?
Goes beyond just the state roots. We've got a lot of deep roots here. My family does, and so we've got ag roots and personally in the tech world, but no one. I don't like talking about myself that much, but quite frankly, there is no one that is postured well with the experience and the track record that I am, Kevin, to step into this. First 20 years of my life was spent on a dairy farm in Meridian, Idaho. The next 20 years plus was spent in 47 different countries and 50 states, and you can't help but learn a few things on what works in government and what, more importantly, what doesn't work. And then 10 years in the state senate, and it's just, when you apply for a job, and that's really what I'm doing, I'm applying for a job, you need to have a resume that fits the requirements of what you're set out to do. And there's a very good match there. And you add to that a desire to serve with a servant leadership style and put power back into the constituency and the people and the citizens, which is truly the highest office in the land, is citizen, then I think that's a compelling story. And I'll match up that with certainly anyone running in this state or any other state.
Senator Fulcher, we appreciate it. If people want to catch you on the road, what can they do?
RussFulcher.com. There's multiple ways to reach out to me, and love to hear from people, and especially with some wise counsel.
And you're hitting the road.
Hitting the road, man. We're going to be gone for about 10 days.
Okay, one final question. How many miles already on the truck?
This cycle alone is right about 62,000.
I should be laughing. I should not be laughing.
I got 2 sets of tires so far.
The magic of Idaho in the 1st Congressional District.
You got it, but I love it. It's great.
You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie. And blessed to be a part of your day, Kevin Miller in the morning. Do appreciate what an incredible program we've had so far. If you missed Lars Larson live from CPAC, if you missed our great friend Bridget Frank talking about the need to raise awareness and to save lives of our folks in the military, to stop suicide in the military, or if you missed Senator Fulcher, you can always go to KIDOTalkRadio.com and check out the podcast. They're on YouTube. They're commercial free, so you go there and check them out and listen and let us know what you think. You can always email me, Kevin at KIDOTalkRadio.com. That's Kevin at KIDOTalkRadio.com. Much more of your phone calls. Obviously, we do want to get your thoughts. The big story, President Trump saying that he would be willing to give teachers a bonus. That's right, a bonus if they were armed and they were specially trained. That's number one. Number two is this issue involving the deputy. And if you are just waking up, maybe you haven't heard, there was a deputy that was armed that responded to the scene, but unfortunately did not go into the building. He has been suspended and now has resigned from work. So that is unfortunate. And we're questioning, when you go to a scene at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, what do you do? So we'll talk about that. Joining us now with some important community information. We're always supporting the military. Our great friend, Major Chris Borders, joining us from the Idaho National Guard. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, and we are always grateful for your support, Kevin, so thanks for that. Before
we get into this, what have you all been up to? I know you got the Army Guard, you got the Air Guard, you're over the whole Guard. Well, you cover the whole Guard, so what are our Idaho troops up to lately?
Well, training, we've got some big events coming up this summer, units coming in from all over the country. We've got some big plans for our own units here, training out in our Orchard Combat Training Center. Air Guard is continuing to prepare for their 2 missions as well, go fight and win our nation's wars and be standing by ready to go to respond to state and local emergencies. So just maintaining our ability to always be ready and always be there.
Boy, that's easier said than done.
It's a challenge, but we're always up for it. What we're here for.
Indeed. So as we take a look at the mission of the Guard, before we talk about this environmental study, let's take a look at employers and how important employers are to the longevity and the ability of the troops here in Idaho to be able to protect us.
Couldn't do our mission without their support. And that goes same with the families, our neighbors, communities. When we have to pack up and leave, it puts a huge strain, a burden on everybody. So we're fortunate to come from a community that understands that, and our employers continue to be extremely supportive and sympathetic to our missions, and that means sometimes we got to pack up and leave them for extended periods of time. And, when you're talking a small business that's maybe only 7 people and you've got 2 or 3 Guard members in there, that could be, up to 50% of your workforce that's punching out for 6 months to a year. So we're really blessed to come from Idaho, a community that understands that, we've got a mission to do, and we've never had problems here like, maybe some other states do. We realize what we've got here, and it's a great relationship between the Idaho National Guard and the community. Couldn't ask for a better one.
Our great friend Major Chris Borders joining us, Kevin Miller in the morning at KIDO Talk Radio. So let's talk about this environmental study that is very interesting concerning the impact of the F-35 on the Treasure Valley. What are the details, sir?
Well, back in December, the 21st of December, Secretary of the Air Force announced the 2 preferred alternatives. Those were Truax Field in Wisconsin and Dannelly Field in Alabama. And although those 2 installations have been identified as the preferred alternatives, that leaves Gowan Field and the other 2 locations, Jacksonville, Florida, and Selfridge, Michigan, as reasonable alternatives. So we're all still candidates until a final decision is made. And that's pending the results of this environmental impact study as well as any other factors the Secretary of the Air Force may consider before making a final decision. So this is something we've known all along, that all 5 locations would undergo the EIS regardless of how we were racked and stacked as preferred alternatives or reasonable alternatives.
I see. And so if people are interested in this, what can they do?
Yes. So Tuesday, the 27th, from 5 to 8 p.m., we are having a scoping meeting. It's the first scoping meeting. We are early on in the stages of this environmental impact study. At the Wyndham Garden on Vista, there at the old Holiday Inn, that's where the scoping meeting is going to occur. And it's an open house format. The public can come down, and we'll have information posters guiding visitors through the venue. And at each poster station, there will be a subject matter expert on hand who can interact with the public, answer questions. And what we're going to be doing is encouraging the public to write their comments down. You can do it right there at the scoping meeting on a comment card and leave it in the comment box. People can take their comment forms home, write their concerns down, mail it in through the Postal Service, or they can even go online to the EIS website, and I can give you that website address. They can go on and put their comments down there, but what doesn't count is just to voice their opinions. We need to get them in writing so we can ensure that they are addressed in the environmental impact statement.
How important is it to get the public's feedback?
It's extremely important because this scoping is really what frames the focus of the environmental impact study on those things unrelated to, its impacts on the wildlife and the air quality. This is what we rely on to determine what we need to consider in terms of public impact versus those things that really wouldn't be a factor. So it's extremely important because we count on the public to show up, voice their concerns or their support for the F-35 mission, and it allows us to refine the study to ensure all of those issues are addressed.
Our great friend Major Chris Borders joining us here from the Idaho National Guard. We have a couple other issues that we need to discuss, and many folks don't know, but particularly let's go with the Air Guard. Your folks are moving in and out of there all the time. We don't hear that the massive deployments, but there are people that are out of country all the time. I know you can't say where they are, but doing real life missions even as we speak.
The public tends to hear about the big major deployments, the big unit deployments, like the one back in 2016, 2017, which was our largest deployment in Idaho Air National Guard history, and it was our longest. We were spread, throughout 10 different locations in support of Operation Inherent Resolve. But what a lot of people don't know about is, in addition to those big major movements, we have folks at any given time somewhere around the world supporting combat operations or overseas contingency operations. So we're busy. I mean, we are very relevant. We play a big part in supporting the current war fight. And again, this is on top of, being here ready to respond to heavy snowfalls or, flooding resulting from heavy snowfalls, just carrying out that state mission as well.
Or the fires.
That's right. We're doing what we need to do right now to make sure we're set up, ready to go this summer.
Our great friend, Major Chris Borders, with us. Finally, what about the families?
Well, it goes back to, how it works with employers. We can't carry out our mission without the support from our families. And we already ask a tremendous amount from our families, just letting us go, for a training weekend or a couple of weeks of annual training here or a mini AT there, annual training, that is. So, part of it is, unfortunately getting them accustomed to us being gone in that training situation. But that's in prep for those times where we have to pack up and move out for maybe a year-long, overseas deployment. You just hear it constantly echoed at retirement ceremonies or promotion ceremonies out here about, the bottom line, we couldn't do any of it without the support that we get from our families. But we've got a lot of programs here in the Idaho National Guard that work to support the families, family readiness programs, both in the Army Guard and the Air Guard out here, that are always there ready to kick in. So while we're deployed and a hot water heater goes out or something like that, we're not focused on, oh my gosh, how is my wife or my husband going to cope with, trying to swap out, a hot water heater while we're gearing up, to perform an operation overseas. We've got programs here in the Guard that just work in a really outstanding manner to take care of our families while we're overseas. And it really takes a group effort. The whole community comes together and just supports us every step of the way. And it, like I said before, Kevin, we're just so fortunate to have that robust support structure here in Idaho.
Major Borders, we're blessed to have you, so thank you. You have a great day.
You bet, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Look forward to talking to you again.
Roger that, sir.
All righty. Talk to you later.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. And we roll on. Liberty Linda joins us now on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Liberty Linda.
Yes, good morning, Kevin. Well, I have two things to talk to you about. One of them is collusion.
Roger that.
I'm just wondering perhaps if we are seeing collusion in all of this. And I was kind of putting everything together, and I can see it. Number one, the police came to his home 38 times. He was on drugs. The FBI drops it completely. And the officer just standing by the wall. I mean, he didn't go in and help. And this Nicholas Cruz told many people he was going to do it. And he also posted on the Internet. Are we seeing collusion here? What do you think?
Well, we've definitely seen incompetency. And here's the other one that I don't get. And to be in the FBI and to be in law enforcement, you have to be special. They don't let just anybody in, thankfully. But how in the world can you miss these things when we're looking at, as you just made the case for us, and yet we're supposed to believe that Donald Trump, the president, was in collusion with the Russians, And this is the same FBI, okay? And, you know, we can talk about the Air Force not passing on the information about the Vegas shooter, and then we've got everything else going on. The sad part about this, Liberty Linda, is that we have more freedom to talk about it logically on this show, on this station, than anywhere else. I have people in all walks of life that want to engage me off the air, and as you know, I listen more off the air than I do on the air. And I don't know how to say this, where people really want to believe that if they ban guns, they vilify the NRA, that we're going to be safe, and we're not. Sean Hannity had a great solution: make everybody go through one entrance, metal detectors, retired military, and that's going to cost money. I get it, but what's the cost of keeping kids safe? And on the other hand, we have people attacking parents, attacking public servants, and because they're kids, so it's not really a fair fight. You can't fight back, but, I mean, this march to save our lives, okay, you're going to skip school, you're going to do all these things, for what? I mean, in school we were taught to think of things critically, and even if we don't agree with someone, to at least try and understand their point from a logical point of view. I'm not seeing that with these folks.
Well, that was my second point, Kevin. I mean, I had just talked to 3 individuals that are wonderful Americans. They love this country. They're good-hearted. They're the best we have. And all 3 of them wanted to take our guns away from us. And after talking to each of these people individually, I saw one common thread, because every single one of them were speaking with anger. And they wouldn't, after I said I was for keeping our guns, they cut me off. They wouldn't allow me to say anything else. So we couldn't have a discussion with common sense and logically, like what you're talking about. And the one common thing they had was anger. So I would like to see the anger part put away and maybe have a talk of common sense. What makes the most sense? I think keeping our guns makes the most sense, just like what you just said. So,
well, you go back to what President Reagan said, Liberty Linda, and it's trust but verify.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I did have a vision about the Las Vegas shooting, and don't really feel like sharing that today, but it was a significant vision that I had regarding that. And so maybe one day I'll feel like I should share that. But anyway, I can see that possibly with this shooting, was there collusion? Should we ask that question? And
well, I think you just did.
Anger. We need to take anger out of this and bring in common sense and logic, just like what you said. I agree with you completely.
Well, that's reassuring.
That way, I always agree with you. I mean, you have more common sense, and that's why everybody loves tuning in. You are like our morning vitamin. If we don't take our vitamin, our day just doesn't go right. So I think we should take the Kevin Miller vitamin every morning.
Well, I agree with that, because if you don't take the vitamin, it stays on the shelf.
Right. So anyway, that's what I feel about you. You're our morning vitamin, and we need to listen every single morning.
God bless you, and thank you for your kind thoughts, my friend.
Well, I sincerely mean them. Have a great day, Kevin.
You too, Liberty Linda. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
580-5436, 580-KIDO. This is something we've been discussing on and off all morning long.
Your concept and your idea about it's called concealed carry, and it only works where you have people very adept at using firearms, of which you have many. And it would be teachers and coaches. If the coach had a firearm in his locker when he ran at this guy, that coach was very brave. Saved a lot of lives, I suspect. But if he had a firearm, he wouldn't have had to run. He would have shot, and that would have been the end of it. And this would only be, obviously, for people that are very adept at handling a gun. And it's called concealed carry. where a teacher would have a concealed gun on them. They'd go for special training, and they would be there, and you would no longer have a gun-free zone. Gun-free zone to a maniac, because they're all cowards. A gun-free zone is let's go in and let's attack, because bullets aren't coming back at us. And if you do this, and a lot of people are talking about it, and it's certainly a point that we'll discuss.
And we'll continue to discuss. That was the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, talking about arming teachers and coming up with a plan. That's next with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio. First, traffic and weather. I love that. Finally back to the 40s. You know, the President and others have enough guts to say what they really feel. It's unfortunate in our society today because of being politically correct, because of being shunned, because of people not wanting to embrace dialogue. They just want to quell dissent, that we seemingly can't do that. That's why it's such a blessing to be with you each and every morning, to hear what you have to say and occasionally chime in on my own. The idea that all of a sudden we're going to ban guns, come up with more laws, and vilify the NRA, and that's going to keep us safe from the mentally deranged, is clearly naive. What needs to happen, and really, whether it's expanded background checks, whether it's an independent prosecutor, to look at the FBI. We're so busy focusing in on vilifying the NRA. Well, what about the FBI? What about the local police? What about the folks that pass the buck? And because they pass the buck, we have children that lost their lives. We have many heroes, the heroic teacher that the President just mentioned. I would hope and I would urge, instead of embracing the hype and hyperbole and the vilification of guns, that we would honor those true heroes that paid the ultimate price. They gave their lives for their kids. Really other people's kids, but their kids. May God bless them in heaven and their families. Kevin Miller, thank you, Ray Amaya. God bless and keep the faith.